In 2014, former President Jacob Zuma asserted that post-1994 South Africa has a good story to tell. But the underlying issues then and today's problems are arguably no different. Youth unemployment, crumbling municipal infrastructure, persistent power cuts, and escalating crime levels, they remain with us. And abroad, one could argue that democratic South Africa's public relations have never been thus strained. Zuma's successor, President Cyril Ramaphosa, has his work cut out on the world stage, whilst Rome happens to battle at home. For some, like our investigations editor, Pieter du Toit, the concern is that the president may be wasting his time with the Trump administration rather than working to reverse rising youth unemployment.
So Ramaphosa is certainly going there on a rescue mission, trying to explain to Trump what the real situation in South Africa is. But Graeme, I have to say, I don't know whether it's even possible to try and change the perspective of Trump. I think it might be a fool's errand to go there.
Later in the show, Cape Town's Denoon descends into disorder. And finally, a hot new Proudly SA geyser promises to slash your power bill.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
And you can get in touch by mailing us thelead@24.com. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. We're joined on the line by our assistant editor for investigations, Pieter du Toit. Pieter, how are you doing? Whereabouts are you in the world today?
Graeme, good afternoon. I'm in Franschhoek in the lovely Western Cape, where the Franschhoek Literary Festival will be taking place this weekend. And of course, News 24 is one of the headline sponsors, and look very much looking forward to some decent discussions about our country and its future.
Fantastic. Before we get into later in the show, just what some of those panels that you're going to be part of, the books that you're going to be talking to, your latest opinion piece, which is still trending on the front page of News 24 today, is with the headline, Refugees, Colonialists and the Unemployed, Not a Pretty Picture for Ramaphosa. Yeah, you have the beauty of a Thursday, taking into account all of the events that have happened since Sunday when those first group of Afrikaners had made their way through from OR Tambo International Airport through to Virginia, Pieter. And of course, there's been so much discussion, so much reflection, so much analysis since then. And with the president sort of speaking on all sides, before we get to him, do you think the GNU under the president has what it takes now to convince Trump next week that it's all not doom and gloom for whites in South Africa when the pair are due to meet at the White House? What's your view?
Jeez, well, Graeme, there's so much there. I mean, there's so much to discuss. There's so much to unpack, and to be quite honest, I've been battling to get my head around all of the events over the last 10 days, everything that's happened over the last 10 days. And certainly, I think it's a quite an interesting moment for us as a nation, for us as South Africans, and for us as a democracy, given the events that's happened since February when, or rather the 20th of January, when Donald Trump was sworn in as American president, and his announcement on the 7th of February that he was going to provide a special dispensation to support Afrikaners who are being persecuted. I mean, it's been quite a wild ride since then, and I think next week is going to be fascinating to watch when President Cyril Ramaphosa travels to Washington, D.C. to try and state his case to the U.S. president, who has taken quite a reactionary, an antagonistic line towards South Africa, a line that many people differ with, including myself, many people who simply do not agree with his analysis of South Africa and his analysis of events in South Africa. So it's going to be very difficult for Ramaphosa to explain that to Trump, who has made up his mind, Graeme, who's made up his mind about how he sees the country, how he sees our history, how he sees the way in which South Africa is trying to reinvent itself after, colonialism and apartheid. The flip side, of course, is that the ANC have largely been in power for the last 30 years, and the problems that we sat with 30 years ago, many would argue, are even worse today. So really a confluence of many bad factors that's going to make it very difficult for Ramaphosa to try and state his case in the US. the events of the last week, the seeing South African so-called refugees, and I'm calling them so-called refugees because I don't think in any logical or internationally accepted or legally accepted definition they can be classed as refugees. And your original question was about convincing U.S. President Donald Trump about the situation that whites in this country find themselves in. Now, look, the facts of the matter are that, only 9% of white people in this country are unemployed. That's comparable to most first world countries. So, just on the facts, whites in this country lead a pretty good life. That does not mean everything's perfect, but, as a white South African, we have it pretty good, I'd argue.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't agree enough. Let's hone in on the president. He's been sort of arguably playing this sort of centrist political role. He's posturing to the different galleries, telling each what that gallery basically in the majority wants to hear. First, he was sort of posturing to African heads of state in Côte d'Ivoire, basically calling these Afrikaner group that had left to Virginia, colonizers, and actually grouping most white South Africans as colonizers, or at least the Afrikaners as such. And then, of course, going to the Nampo Harvest Festival, Pieter, and then, of course, we've seen the big headline from that, calling the Afrikaners cowards and using, a bit more heavier language there. Your views on how he's sort of playing this internationalist role on many fronts, whilst here at home we've got these big issues?
Look, you can use the word dishonest or disingenuous, but maybe we should be charitable at least and say confused. I mean, the president does seem confused in the way in which he's trying to manage this morass, or the way in which he's trying to navigate this minefield. I mean, going to Ivory Coast, trying to maintain his standing amongst these African peers, and then calling white South Africans colonizers. I mean, I think we're past the point where white South Africans can be classed as colonizers. 99% of whites in this country, their ancestors have been here for 300, 400 years. Now, we can discuss, talk, argue about our fraught and contested history, about the different races that came together on the southern tip of Africa between the 1400s and the 1700s, and what happened since then. But South Africans who are here are indigenous South Africans. I don't consider myself part of a colonizing class at all. I'm a South African through and through, and saying stuff like that really does cause unnecessary alienation, and it does tell us something about the way in which Cyril Ramaphosa wants to manage this, which is, as I said earlier, kind of confused. Then you go to Nampo Harvest Festival, the country's biggest agricultural festival, where the biggest farmers in the country, yes, admittedly, most of them white, where they come together to discuss agriculture as an economic activity. One of the most important economic activities in the country as far as its contribution to GDP is concerned, as far as its contribution to innovation, economic, financial, technical innovation is concerned. It's a big employer. Then he goes there, obviously trying to send the message that he recognizes and acknowledges the role of agriculturalists in this country, of farmers in this country. But, then he says something like, these people who have left the country are cowards. Now, we don't know whether they are cowards, but it's definitely much more complicated and nuanced than the president simply saying they're running away from transformation or the democratic project or whatever we're trying to achieve in this country. So I think it's quite an insensitive and simplistic way of looking at things. The fact of the matter is, Graeme, and the following day after he attended Nampo, the latest unemployment numbers came out. I mean, it's almost 33%. The broader definition is almost at 44%. This is something that should, in a normal functioning democracy, lead to the fall of a government. But we've been sitting with these large unemployment numbers, these moribund GDP growth numbers for the last decade or more. This needs to be laid at the feet of the ANC. Now, people leave the country for all manner of reasons, better economic opportunities, whatever the case may be. So I think it's disingenuous and unnecessary for the president to call those 49 so-called refugees, because they aren't refugees, to say they are cowards. The problems that we sit with in this country are problems that impacts on everyone, whether you're black, white, colored, or brown, or Indian, or whatever your chosen hue is. It's poor economic growth, high numbers of unemployment, problematic crime numbers, so on and so forth, crumbling service delivery, crumbling municipalities. Those are problems that affect all of us, not just white people, not just black people.
Especially echoed by the farmers in attendance, it is, echoing a lot of those concerns to our colleague Nick Wilson attending the Harvest Festival, Pieter.
Absolutely, Graeme. So just on that point, I listened to your podcast with Nick, and incidentally, flying down to Franschhoek on Thursday, I bumped into someone that was at Nampo. The farmers there, they look at these 49 immigrants and they say, look, the people are leaving because of specific reasons, but they're not farmers. Farmers, the big agriculturalists in this country are staying, and they're trying to make a difference. They're trying to make a contribution towards a growing economy. Are they getting the support from this government that they need? Have they gotten the support from the ANC government in the past? No, but they're trying to make it work.
Look, South Africa on the world stage, we have a rich history of prime ministers or presidents throughout the last more than 100 years or so of trying to play an increasing sort of like internationalist role. A very good example around the early 1900s, of course, was Jan Smuts. He'd often, brush shoulders with Winston Churchill, all the rest. Yes, it feels like with President Cyril Ramaphosa, he's seemingly in that same sort of category at the moment. He's constantly either trying to sort out things between Ukraine and Russia. He's got his hands full with Trump at the moment, especially with G20 coming up late in the year. Yes, governance methods and governance structures can work concurrently. Yes, he can be an internationalist and he can look at things at home. But to a lot of our readers and to a lot of people listening to this particular show might have that sense in the back of their mind going, why is the president so busy with Trump and everything else when we do need to focus at the issues at home? Your views on that, Pieter?
Well, look, Graeme, the first thing is, Cyril Ramaphosa is nowhere near the stature of someone like Nelson Mandela, who really was an international statesman. And, if you want to go pre-1994, you mentioned Jan Smuts, who was on Churchill's war cabinet. It's easy. They are both in completely different leagues than what Ramaphosa is. The role or the engagement with Trump at the moment, and we're looking forward to next week with bated breath, given what happened to someone like Volodymyr Zelensky and some other international leaders when they visited the Oval Office.
Yeah, let's hope Ramaphosa doesn't have a photo opportunity, Pieter, and with JD Vance and all of them in the room ganging up on him, because nobody wants to see that for him.
Well, Graeme, that's coming. There's no doubt that's coming. I mean, foreign policy experts, U.S. political experts, agree that those photo ops in the Oval Office is where Trump flexes his muscle. That's where he really gets the brass knuckles out, as it were, figuratively speaking, to try and bully and to try and coax and influence foreign leaders. So there's no doubt that Cyril Ramaphosa will be exposed to the hostile American press in the Oval Office, and that he will be surrounded by antagonistic senior U.S. officials. And getting back to my point earlier, Ramaphosa is going there to try and salvage what he can from a very fraught relationship with the United States. Ever since Trump was elected president in November last year, he took office on the 20th of January. But even during his first term, there was this strange obsession and fascination with the plight of so-called white Afrikaner boers, farmers, farm murders, plaasmoorde. That became one of the calling cards of Trump's African policy, certainly South African policy. He tweeted about South African farm murders, farm attacks, plaasmoorde during his first term. That just continued during his second term, and it has reached a crescendo where he signed a number of executive orders, instructed his State Department to help so-called Afrikaner refugees resettle in America, stopped all assistance to South Africa as far as foreign aid is concerned. This week gave an instruction to the State Department and all the U.S. government agencies to stop working with South Africa as far as the G20 is concerned.
Unbelievable.
So the relationship between South Africa and America has never been as low as it is now. So Ramaphosa is certainly going there on a rescue mission, trying to explain to Trump what the real situation in South Africa is. But Graeme, I have to say, I don't know whether it's even possible to try and change the perspective of Trump. I think it might be a fool's errand to go there. From everything that we've read, from everything that we know about Trump, the guy's made up his mind. South Africa is a basket case. It's a shithole country. There's genocide happening. There's large-scale confiscation of land. That's what the guy believes, and he believes it because of the influence of social media, because of the influence of certain actors that have links to South Africa, like Elon Musk. And that's what he bases the foreign policy about. I think Ramaphosa can go there with policy papers and documents and budget documents and, whatever the case may be. I don't think it's going to be easy, if possible at all, to sway Trump. I think it's going to be a very difficult mission to Washington next week. But that's the role that he's playing on the international stage. It's all about salvaging South Africa's reputation at the moment, Graeme.
Yeah, Pieter, and then very quickly, just to end off sort of looking at your opinion piece, you also allude to the ANC spokesperson Mahlengi Bengu Motsiri, also on this podcast recently, not the lead, basically stating that foreign investors, despite promising to inject billions into the economy and to create thousands of jobs, can quote-unquote go to India or elsewhere. So again, from the same party, we're not doing ourselves any favors here when we do need to boost the economy. And the International Monetary Fund, as an example, has already slashed the economic forecast for South Africa for the next financial year. I mean, we've still got the question of the budget, everything else,
Look, the single most important question that we have to engage with in this country, the single biggest issue, the single most pressing issue that we have to address in this country is low economic growth, because low economic growth means less employment. Less employment means more poverty, and more poverty means greater inequality. If we don't address economic growth and employment, we're on a hiding to nothing in this country. And I simply do not think that this government, led by the ANC as the majority party, is doing everything in its power to engineer or accelerate or ignite bigger and better economic growth. That's simply not what's happening. And if you see the spokesperson of the majority party saying that companies can take their billions to invest and they can go invest it elsewhere, is that the right way to go about things? Is that the right way? Is that the signal that we want to send to foreign investors? Is that the signal you want to send to unemployed youth, unemployed young people who are struggling to get a job? I don't think that's where we want to be. I don't think that's where we need to be. It's not helping us. And it certainly signals to me, I think, the kind of ideological straitjacket that the ANC is still stuck in. We need to do everything in our power to remove strictures to economic growth, to remove barriers to create employment, and to remove barriers to enhance and encourage investment in this country. And I'm not seeing that they're doing that, and I don't see that urgency and that single-minded determination to make sure that this country grows, because that's the only way we're going to lift people out of poverty. And when you listen to the ANC spokesperson, she's not worried about that.
A lot of the things that you touched on here in the lead, will you be sort of speaking from the same hymn sheet at the Franschhoek Literary Festival, Pieter, or what else is on the go for you? And what are you reading at the moment?
Graeme, absolutely. I'm going to be taking part and leading a couple of panels, including a panel with Tony Leon, the former leader of the opposition, who's just published a new memoir, as well as Matthew Sposa, the former ANC Treasurer General, who will also be discussing his memoir. And the third person on the panel will be Anne Bernstein, who's an economist with the Centre for Development and Enterprise in Johannesburg. And that will definitely be at the top of the discussion. How to get the country out of this quagmire and this trap of low economic growth that we've been stuck in for certainly since 2011, 2012. So I think, it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about where we're headed, where we should be headed, and what we can do to get there. And it's going to be great to be talking with people like Matthew Sposa and Tony Leon.
Sure, enjoy it. I'm jealous. Enjoy the lack of weather. You came out at the best time, right before the coldest of cold winters, that we already got the chill in the air here in the mother city. Pieter du Toit, assistant editor for investigations at News 24, penned the latest opinion piece, sort of summing up the events of the week: refugees, colonists, and the unemployed. Not a pretty picture for Ramaphosa. Baie dankie, Pieter. Lekker dag verder. Enjoy the festival.
Thanks, Graeme. Keep well.
Cheers, bye. To our trending topic now, in the sprawling township of Denoon seen residents protest throughout this week, all in anger over the City of Cape Town's decision to bulldoze some structures in the West Coast area. Some locals claim the city unduly destroyed homes and businesses. The council insists only a few partially built illegal brick and mortar wall structures have been removed. Residents claim more homes have been torn down, but News 24's Valani Ludidi reports that he's physically struggled to access those parts due to congestion, whilst police officers on the ground warned against approaching them. Denoon's grown exponentially since the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the country's tough economic times. The township's main arteries have been shut in the meantime as police patrolled the streets, with minibus taxis as well as MyCity buses barred from entering the suburb. It's understood protesters also had knocked down the wall to a local farm, claiming that the owner had opened its local dam wall on purpose to flood nearby shacks. 5 people are currently in police custody. That's following running battles with officials. We'll keep you posted on any developments there. Looking for even more political intrigue? Well, this month's free audiobook for News 24 subscribers is Being There by former DA leader turned ambassador Tony Leon. In it, he reveals how his successor Helen Zille helped keep the Democratic Alliance in the government of national unity. That's despite its early clashes with the ANC over, among other things, cabinet positions. Have a listen from one of his chapters.
Friday's vote in Parliament for Ramaphosa's re-election as president, like the provincial votes for the ANC's Panyaza Lesufi as Premier of Gauteng, and the IFP's Tami Ntuli as Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, was based on an agreement. Yet its last-minute provisions will allow much scope for manoeuvring in terms of seats, both in number and influence, at a cabinet table still being designed.
And finally, there's a hot new geyser hitting the market, according to well-known consumer journalist Wendy Knowler, and it's proudly South African. It's called the Integrated Heat Pump Geyser. It's been developed by Joburg energy company Power for Less, and they've got the backing of Nedbank and even the Massmart Group, among others. What makes it unique is that the SAIHP's heat pump uses the surrounding air to warm the water, using only a fraction of the cost of electricity to do so. For example, it uses only 0.6 kilowatts of power to heat a 200-litre tank to 75 degrees Celsius. That's up for 48 hours. What would usually cost you and I nearly 100 Rand a day to heat up our water, that bill is now reduced to just 7 Rand a day. Better yet, the stainless steel geyser, its company says, is burst-proof and may last up to a decade. The IHP, it's manufactured abroad and carries the EU seal of approval, currently retails at around 30,000 Rand, that's installation included, at most Builders Warehouse outlets.
Are you burnt out from the week that was, but need to stay in the news loop? Every Saturday morning at 6, we release The Weekender, a quirky, in-depth look at South Africa and its people. Chock full of exclusive interviews, food, wine, playlists, and opinions, The Weekender is the ultimate segue into Saturday, right here on News 24.
From Ramaphosa's White House woes to a new geyser warming up our savings accounts, South Africa's undoubtedly always in the world's glare, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Thanks so much. We continue to receive your mails and comments as to our latest episode. The last one was our discussions with Nick Wilson at the Nampo Harvest Festival, and Transparent wrote in response to that show, Mr. President, quote unquote, if you felt so safe in South Africa, why then do you always have so many personal bodyguards around you all the time, paid for by us? We'd love more of your mails, comments. You can send us your voice notes even at thelead@24.com to be included in the next show. They're dropping Monday to Thursday at 7 o'clock in the evening. If you need to be reminded of them, just hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels. We're back next week, but until then, my name's Graeme Raubenheimer. Have a fantastic weekend. So long as there's news, we'll have the lead.